and a very good morning to you all. I'm Aisha Sharif, Senior Training Coordinator of CSTI, and on behalf of Civil Service Training Institute, I would like to welcome you all to the 6th webinar of 2021, titled as How to Future Tools for Foreseeing Development Trends and Challenges, being held in collaboration with UNDP Maldives and facilitated by Mr. Fernando Galindo, Innovation, Research and Development Lead of UNDP Maldives. This is the 11th webinar since the beginning of our webinar series, and it is our anticipation that the knowledge shared in this series is disseminated to the larger percentage of the population and results out a positive impact within the community and working pool of the country. So focusing on today's webinar, as part of the UNDP Maldives support to the SAP and SDG implementation, this webinar will be the third session among a total of 5 sessions in the UNDP Maldives Accelerator Lab's NEXTGEN webinar series for Maldives Civil Service. We would like to highlight the success of our previous 3 webinars in this series, and we immensely appreciate the support we have received from our audiences. The main objective of this series is to provide practical and innovative tools for the implementation of public policies to civil service officials. So today's session, How to Future Tools for Foreseeing Development Trends and Challenges, will be part 1 of 2 practical sessions, which will provide a brief introduction to foresight tools needed for public institutions. Today's webinar will go on as such. We'll begin with the session facilitated by Mr. Fernando Galindo, and he will then interact with you all through a Q&A session. But before we begin the session, I would like to highlight a few points to be noted by our participants. Kindly keep your mic on mute while the session is ongoing. We will be opening the floor for question and answers. So should you have any queries, you may write in the chat box, or once the session is done, you may choose to interact us through your mics and even video. So now, without further ado, we'll proceed with the session. As mentioned before, our session will be facilitated by Mr. Fernando Galindo, Innovation, Research and Development Lead of UNDP Maldives, with a background in social sciences, master's degree in international cooperation and master's degree in international relations, committed to achieving the SDG agenda, supporting countries and public institutions in doing development differently. Mr. Galindo has been part of UNDP's NEXTGEN of thinkers and doers since 2012. Mr. Fernando Galindo.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everybody. Welcome to this 4th webinar session on how to future. I'm going to start to sharing my screen, and please let me know if you can hear me well. And before starting, I would really like to invite all of you, like last time, just to drop in the chat box from what institutions are you connecting, your name, obviously, and the area in which you work on. So in the meantime, please, if you can drop in the chat box, would be really great to know. Yeah, okay, you can hear me well. That's great. To everybody, please feel free to drop in the chat box. Okay. As you know, this is the part 1 of 2 sessions on how to future, which is focused on foresight and a couple of tools for foreseeing development trends and challenges. So before starting, I would really like to share with all of you what's going to be the methodology for this session. It's going to be one part is focus. Please also confirm that you can see my screen. So you can see on the slide I'm sharing with you, it's going to be a brief introduction to a couple of concepts and methods. The second part is going to be focused on mega trends in development. The third part is going to be a practical exercise in which I really like to encourage all of you to participate, since this is a really broad topic. When we talk about foresight, it's really broad. This is going to be a familiarization exercise, because unfortunately we are not have the time enough just to deep dive in this whole interesting world of the foresight and the many tools we can find, but we are going to have a familiarization exercise. And finally, we are going to close this webinar with a couple of recommended readings and websites. So again, please, in the meantime, I'd really like to know a little bit about yourself. So if you can drop in the chat box, where are you connecting to this session? Please let us know through the chat box to know. Well, let's start. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a wake-up call for governments on the vulnerability of our economy and social systems, and the ability of the machinery of governments to be able to process rapidly changing, cascading impacts into policy, programs, financial decisions, and continuous feedback and review. So basically, we need to develop capacities to deal with these long-term and cascading global challenges for the next 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years time. That's why now we are covering this topic of foresight. Okay, this activity, this webinar is based on this book, which is How to Future, Leading and Sense Making in an Age of Hyper Change. If you are interested in knowing more about how to plan, how to design and implement the 21st century public policies, this is a really recommended book. All this session is going to be based on this book, but obviously it's not the same if you have the chance to read this book in case you are interested in further information. In the meantime, thank you for to everybody who is joining us from different institutions, Department of National Registration, Maldives Immigration. Welcome everybody. Okay, so now again, this is the icebreaker activity to everybody. So please take a look at this question and the following question, because I would really like to ask you, what would you identify as the 3 critical issues for the future in the Maldives at social, political, environmental, economic, educational, or cultural level? So please drop them, the 3 critical issues, on the chat box. What do you consider are these 3 critical issues for the future in the country? Let's take 1 minute just to drop your questions. I'd like to read from you. Okay, one would be corruption. Okay, what else? What would you identify as the 3 critical issues from the future in the Maldives? But let's try to, if you can elaborate a little bit on this issue, that would be great. Political issues, okay, but if you can elaborate a little bit more, pestle, urban issues, okay, great, pollution issues. What else? What other critical issues for the future of Maldives do you think might be? Try to elaborate a little bit on that, like okay, pollution or waste management, or what do you think are the 3 critical issues? Please, religious issues, pollution, sorry. There are not correct answers for this question. I just really like to know, what do you think are the soil erosion? Okay, thank you. Smoking in public areas. I just really like to know, what do you consider are the 3 main critical issues for the future in the Maldives. 30 more seconds. Please drop your answers on the chat box. There is many drug addicts, no proper decision on policy levels to find a solution of this issue. Okay, thank you. We have different answers from urban or urbanization, pollution, soil erosion, drug addiction. What else? 10 more seconds. Solid waste disposal. Thank you. Okay. What other issues do you consider are critical for the future of this country? Public transportation. Great. Sea level rise. That's a really good one. Integrate public transport. Okay, good. What else? Okay, that's good. Urban things, urbanization, housing, that's another critical issue for the country. Great. IT threats. Okay, yeah, everything related with IT and internet security. Okay, that's good. That's good. Let's stop here and then move on. Okay, so let's take a quick look on the concepts and methods of foresight and foreseeing before moving on. Again, this is a brief approach to a broad and interesting area. Probably if you are familiar with this methodology, you will know that there are many tools. But in this case, I just want to give you, let's say, the more basic concepts that will allow you to apply this approach in your current activities and projects in your level. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Or if I'm not wrong, 1 minute explaining what is foresight. And please give me 1 second. I'm gonna share sound. Okay. And now. Okay.
The practice of looking forward into the future is something we all do naturally. When we imagine possible futures, explore options, weigh pros and cons, and design plans, we're using foresight. When we run mental movies to explore possible strategies and goals, we're also using foresight. Increasingly, organizations and governments are using foresight to think creatively and systematically about the future. Foresight enables us to make better plans and reduce surprises. It helps inform policy decisions, design public services, and shape strategies. Strategic foresight is a practice that uses evidence, creativity, expertise, and participation. Strategic foresight allows us to understand, plan for, and influence future events and situations. Foresight isn't about predicting the future. Rather, it helps us to see what may happen and to understand a range of plausible futures that we may confront. Foresight is interdisciplinary, blending future studies, system dynamics, physical and social sciences, participatory design, and strategic management. It's supported by professional communities of practice and by academic scholarship. It is deliberate, imaginative, and rigorous.
Okay. This is a brief introduction. What is not foresight? It's not futurology. We are not talking about any crystal ball. It is not astrology, speculation, neither any conspiracy theory, because we can predict the future, but we can be better prepared for it. Foresight, in that sense, it's a strategic way to think, plan, and design public policies and prepare institutions for envisioning possible changes that might impact the society we live in. In consequence, it's based on research, data analysis, curiosity, and vision. This is absolutely important to keep in mind and be mindful of that. Okay. Let me touch upon briefly on the different strategic foresight methods. The first one is the famous horizon scanning, in which we seek and research signals of change in the present and their potential future impact. I'm going to present you a little example on that. This is the foundation of any strategic foresight process, and it's basically based on research, desk research, expert surveys, review of existing future literature. This horizon scanning, we're going to have a brief exercise on that. The second methods on foresight is the megatrends analysis, in which basically we explore and review this large-scale change building in the present and the impacts in a upcoming future. We also are going to cover this megatrend analysis. Other method is the scenario planning, in which we develop multiple stories or multiple images about how the future could look like in order to explore and learn more about this item. Not for this session, but for the next and final session, we are going to have a brief approach to this building a scenario planning. And the other and the final strategic foresight method, it's the visioning and backcasting, in which we develop an image of what's going to be the ideal future or the undesirable future state, and we working backwards to identify what steps to take in order to reach this ideal future or to avoid this undesirable future. So those are four methods and strategies. Obviously, all of them are much more broader, but for this, introductory exercise, it's good to keep that in mind. Okay. There are also different levels when we think about the foresight or envisioning the future. There are four concepts here. The first concept, which is absolutely familiar for all of us, is to anticipate, which is basically we need to predict, create early warnings about risk and opportunities. But the basic question when we think of anticipate is what we can expect from X activity or X event in the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. The second concept when we think of foresight is envisioning. And this is basically exploring how current trends and new possibilities that might shape what comes next. The question for this specific vision concept is what might happen if X event and Y converge or conflict. I mean, in case we have two different trends, what might happen if, for instance, the artificial intelligence with migration converge in our context? This is envisioning. The third concept is discover, and it's basically when we prove possibilities and unforeseen obstacles and opportunities. And in this case, it's like, okay, what do we not yet seen about the opportunities from one particular trend plus another trend in a future context? So in this case, we are trying to identify what kind of opportunities one particular trend can have in our context. And the final concept is the shape, in which it's about creating simulated experiences of possible futures by prototyping, media, artifacts, or immersion. So the question here is how different is the experience of a particular world and how and what might change as a result. So these four concepts have a different approach. The initial two, anticipate and envision, it's a kind of defensive approach to the foresight, in which we are trying to anticipate and envision what's going on. And a more offensive or participative approach is when we also focus on discover opportunities and make that these opportunities become in a particular way. If you take a look, all of this process, all of these 5 webinars have been focused on, that's why we started with the 21 lessons for the 21st century, in which we are trying to reflect on the needs, the challenges we face at the public level. Then we went for this design thinking and this human-centered design approach, which is a way to plan, to design this new kind of policies. And now we are trying to discover ways to planning the future, considering the different trends. At the public level, in general terms, we usually focus on this. If you can take a look at this circle, red cycle, we focus on anticipate, but we don't cover envision, discover, and shape on the foresight. We usually, when we plan any kind of policy, public policy, we focus on anticipation, which is good, but this is for your information. We also have other ways to cover in our activities. Why? Because basically the question behind all of these activities has been what's the relevance of the institution, of our public institutions, in the challenges that we are facing in this 21st century. So this image explains in a better way how should be the public policy implementation and design in the 21st century. This image is taken from the British Civil Service Commission, in which this is the way in which they work. Let's say the business as usual, it's the way in which they implement their policies. It's in black. For instance, they formulate policies, they implement policies, monitor current events, and then evaluate the impact and modify events. So this is the business as usual, but they have implemented at the same time, when they are monitoring the different events, anticipate future events, and then we jump into the red letters there, in the red sentences, in which they are at the same time, they are working on gather intelligence or gather information, exploring the dynamics of change, describing what the future might be like, and develop response. So this is the way, this is the image, and this image explains really well what this 5 webinar series is focused on. We are trying to provide you a brief approach on this kind of way to planning the public policies. And now let's jump to the global trends. I have talked about them, and based on the University of Sydney, the business school, we have identified 6 global trends. Those are the technology, the impact of technology, the demographic change, the rapid urbanization, the amplified individuals or the citizens, the citizens' amplified participation. The 5th one is the economic power shift, and the 6th one is the climate and resource security. Please take attention to the next video, in which they explain what are these global trends, because this is going to be the basis for the participatory exercise which is coming. Let's take a look at this video, please.
What are the fundamental forces that will change our world? Identifying these trends and understanding their impact is key to knowing how businesses and communities operate today and into the future. These are megatrends, a term coined by John Naisbitt in the 1980s. They are large, transformative processes with global reach, broad scope, and dramatic impact. The University of Sydney Business School has identified 6 fundamental and interrelated megatrends. The acceleration, distribution, and application of computing power, coupled with the exponential growth of data, are enabling extraordinary technological advances. We have entered the fourth industrial revolution. 90% of the world's data has been created in the past 2 years. In the last 5 years, the number of people using the internet grew by 83%. Almost 60% of the world's population is now connected, and almost half of us use social media. Machines are getting faster and better. AlphaGo Zero, an AI program, has mastered the game by playing against itself. The use of algorithms is accelerating at an exponential rate, with 90% of stock trades now created by algorithms, up from 75% since 2017. Robots are getting better at building things. Algorithms can diagnose disease, write articles, manage funds, and deliver individually tailored learning. Communities around the world are experiencing rapid and profound demographic change, creating new challenges for businesses and individuals alike. As populations age, there will be fewer workers to support the growing number of people in retirement. For every elderly person, today there are 4 people of working age. By 2050, that ratio is projected to be just 2 people of working age to every 4 elderly persons. Human demographic change is occurring at a different pace across the globe. By 2050, Africa will be the major contributor to global population growth. Africa's share of global population will rise from 16% in 2015 to 25% in 2050. As the developed world ages, Africa's younger population will require very different approaches and policies. Demographic and social changes will see governments and businesses finding huge opportunities, as well as facing huge challenges as the largest generation in history, millennials, drive the economy. Millennials and those that come after them will be more educated and come with different expectations regarding opportunity, mobility, relationships, and ownership. The future is one of cities. Today, more than half the world's population live in cities, generating 85% of global GDP. Globally, we are on track for 60% urbanization by 2030. In the developed world, consolidation will be even more intense, with an estimated 81% of the population living in cities. The majority of this will happen in Africa and Asia. This megatrend has built-in tension due to demographic change. Many cities are set to grow, with 1.5 million people a week joining cities across the world through a combination of migration and childbirth. However, around 100 of the top cities are expected to shrink over the next 10 years, in part due to aging populations in countries like Germany, Italy, Japan, South Korea, and China. New centers of growth are emerging in Asia and in Africa. We are witnessing the rise of the individual like never before. Tremendous technological advances and connectivity are empowering individuals across the world. Almost 5 billion people are using mobile phones, and of those devices, more than half are smartphones. This megatrend will vary substantially across different regions. Those who do not have access to technology and connectivity available to most will feel increasingly disempowered. New forms of organization, such as the gig economy, also raise new questions around responsibilities of businesses and the status and rights of workers. As this trend continues to amplify our voices, governments and individuals need to understand the trade-offs between access and privacy, between empowerment and isolation. The world economy is set to shift as Asia becomes the largest trading region, fueling the rise of a mass affluent community and a new breed of corporations. Just 2 countries, China and India, will account for 35% of the world's population and 25% of global GDP. This megatrend looks at the global economic power shift. We will see a restructuring of the global economy, with non-OECD economies expected to account for 57% of GDP by 2030. The economic influence of the G7 countries will shift to the emerging 7 countries. By 2040, the E7 economies will be double that of the G7. By 2030, 5 billion people will be middle class. This global mass affluent community possess significant purchasing power. 2/3 of them will reside in Asia Pacific. The shift in wealth to the rich will accelerate. Currently, about half of the world's wealth is held by 1% of the population. By 2030, the richest 1% will own 2/3. Economic power shifts of this magnitude will fundamentally change both individual and nations' prosperity. These opportunities, along with significant risks, will play out on the world stage. The climate and resource security megatrend captures the increasing pressure on critical resources within the mega-ecological narrative of climate change. This unprecedented demand on the Earth's resources is unfolding against the bigger story of global climate change. We are witnessing unstoppable bushfires and smoke-filled cities. Glaciers and islands are disappearing. Tropical archipelagos are increasingly lashed by intense monsoon storms. Climate change is not a prediction, it is our new normal. Prolonged droughts, rising sea levels, and more frequent severe weather events threaten to make more areas unlivable, displacing many millions of people from their home. Climate disruption is also accelerating global biodiversity crisis, threatening 1 million species to the brink of extinction. Corporations are principal agents in the production of greenhouse gas and can no longer ignore the trade-off between economic and environmental well-being. It is no longer possible to continue with business as usual, but as capitalism depends on consuming the natural environment to ensure continual economic growth, how can business and governments respond to the challenge of our time?
Okay, that's good. You know, the real question here would be, what do they mean for the Maldives? Because all these trends are going to impact or are impacting our current day-to-day work directly or indirectly. Okay, but let's keep talking about different concepts really useful when we talk about foresight. Those are signal, trends, that we had covered before, and drivers. Let's take a quick look on this relationship. In this picture, you can take a look that these drivers, these trends, are fed by different signals. These signals at the same time feed the trends, and those trends might feed the drivers. But this is not in a directional way. It's presented in a way in which even drivers might influence different signals or create different signals or create different trends, or the signals might create different drivers. I mean, every of these three concepts are interconnected to each other. Let me explain in a easier way. What are signals? Basically, a signal is something that you encounter that provides insight or evidence what can shed light on the future. You can take a look at different concepts for any foresight activity. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that, but a signal, just to give you an example, might be understood like an example, like people now, for instance, look for jobs using their smartphones rather than looking in newspapers. For this is a signal that might allow us to understand, okay, understanding that signal, I can implement a better policy in my community or in my institution. This is the signal. The trends, we just took a look on the trends, but basically a trend can be defined as an emerging or outgoing pattern of change. We have explained the video, explaining the 6 biggest mega trends that the global that the world is living right now: urbanization, demographic change, the technology disruption, the climate, and resource security. But at the same time, there are drivers. Basically, those are forces that shape the future. It means if trends describe changes of a bounded duration of limited scope, drivers represent the long-term dynamics that shapes or compel trends. Basically, those drivers are the forces that underline the characteristics of society, politics, economic, technology, and environment. The best way to understand what is a driver, for instance, it's the increasing sugar intake in our daily food consumptions is a driver for obesity. This is an example. So again, let's keep in mind these 3 concepts: a signal, drivers, and trends. Those concepts are important for any foresight activity. When we carry out different activities related to foreseeing, we need to understand where to look at or what are our scanning sources. There are secondary and primary sources. The secondary, basically, we are surrounded by many of them. If we pay attention to the information, we can identify different signals. When we pay attention even to communities, to the citizens, we can identify different signals of change or different trends. For instance, we can find this information on professional or academic journals, on reports, on global or national news, on podcasts, blogs, or newsletters. But if we really carry out any specific foresight activity or envisioning activity, we also need to ask to experts' view, interviews, observational research, future ethnography, but basically we need to access and understand the databases. We need to be able to understand have the capacity to analyze the data analysis. Again, this is a couple of concepts to keep in mind for any kind of future activity. And now, having said that, with these basic concepts, we are gonna explore briefly in a sensing or scanning exercise. We are gonna try to find signals on the future now. So I'm gonna invite you to work on the next exercise. We are gonna take 10 minutes time just to work on this, give me one second, just to work on this timeline activity. Let me give you the explanation of the instructions. I really encourage all of you, if we like to take advantage to this activity, to participate actively. Because again, this is not about right or wrong answers, but this is about to get familiar with this exercise that will allow you to replicate in your day-to-day work activities. What are the instructions? We're going to take these 10 minutes. The instructions are, we are open your mic and feel free to speak and share your ideas or drop them in the chat box. We are going to use Mural, this Mural activity. I'm going to copy and paste this Mural link. If you also want to use this Mural link, just click on the link on the chat box, and you can post on the Mural. We are going to use your ideas. But basically, we need to close our eyes, think for 1 minute on the upcoming events from 2021 to 2026 at the national or international level, and we are going to rate the impact of these events in the government level or the public level in the country. Let me give you one example. In the timeline, we are going to identify, for instance, that in 2022, in November, in Qatar, it's gonna take place the FIFA World Cup. This is one event that is gonna happen. The level of impact in the country from 1 to 3, it's gonna be 3. Why? Because because it's gonna have a low level of impact in the governance in the country. So the rate of the impact is going to be 1, is a strong or direct impact in the country. Number 2, it's a mid or middle impact. And number 3, it's no influence or little impact. So please, when you participate, explain the event and explain what do you consider is the rate of impact. I have another example. For instance, in 2023, in the Maldives, it's going to take place the presidential election. The level of impact is going to be 1 because it's going to be a high impact in the governance and the public life in the country. So those are the instructions. Let me stop here. I'm going to drop this link to the dropped in the chat box. Please access to this link, and we are gonna share also our screen. Hussein, over to you if you can share your screen. And we are gonna use exactly, thank you. We're gonna use exactly this timeline. So we only have 10 minutes just to populate this exercise. This exercise will allow you just to envisioning what activities might happen at the in upcoming in the future. Okay, so you can access to this mural. Click on the chat box, and then you can participate. So open up your mics. I really encourage all of you to participate and drop and post or share, open your mics, what events might happen in 2021, in the next 3 months, in 2022, in 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026. If you also like to share this, your thoughts or insights, please open your mics or drop in the chat box and rate them with 1 if they have good impact in the high impact in the governance or public level in the country, 2 if it's a middle impact, and 3 if it's no impact or less impact in the country. Feel free to post that. I don't know if you are familiar with that. You can use the post-it if you are familiar with. You post on the events and you can write it down. If not, if you are not familiar, but if you like to share your ideas, please feel free to open up your mics. Your mics and share. Again, we are going to have only 7 minutes just to populate this timeline with the future and upcoming events. Again, I encourage all of you to participate. If you like the only way to make sense of this kind of tools, it's only if you participate and share your ideas. Again, the idea of this exercise is not to get right or wrong answers, but it's just to get familiar with that. Anybody who wants to open its mic and share what upcoming events are coming in the next 5 years' time and share with the audience, feel free to do that or drop in the chat box. Hussein, it's part of the Accelerator Lab team, and he's also working and supporting us on on collecting the information on this timeline. So Hussein, if you have anything else to add, please feel free to do that. Okay, we have one participation, which is the COP26. Yeah, this is one upcoming and important event.
Yeah, Fernando, just wanted to add that for the participants, you can, if you want to write, you can simply double click on the sticky note and you can write. But also, as Fernando mentioned, you can also drop your answers in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd really like to listen any of you. Again, what the coming event might happen globally, not necessarily in the Maldives, and what would be the impact of this event in the future in the country.
And I think we have some more answers.
Okay, yeah, we have also, thank you, Hussein. Yeah.
Travel restrictions and something about the determine the type of government. Yeah, so.
Yeah, exactly. We are going to have no, it's in 2023. It's going to be the elections. But what other events or global trends might impact the country in the upcoming years? Let's think on, we are just after the COVID, many things has changed. So 2020 and this 2021, 2020 was the year of the pandemic. Today, 2021 is still a pandemic year, but however, this is the vaccination year. There are different events in terms of tourism. There is different events in terms of governance. There are different global events that might happen in the upcoming years. If we are able to identify these upcoming events, we are going to have a better outlook when we plan any activity. So what other things we have? Pre-arrival visas for 2023. But what is this about? The country is going to request pre-arrival visas in 2023. Please, if you can elaborate a little bit more. Yeah, it's planned that in 2023, maybe we can have an economic normalization after COVID. Exactly. What other activities, what other things, upcoming events might happen in the next 5 years' time? I mean, if you are not, this exercise, just for your information, can be used specifically when you need to plan the different activities. If you use this model, this Canvas model, and you spend with your team 1 hour on populate this Canvas, is really useful because it allows you to have a better big picture on what's going on. Probably, even if you are working on a local community or in an office for a national project, this kind of exercise is really useful for envisioning what's going to happen and what these events might impact in our activities. What else do we have here? For instance, that's right, in the year 2025, 5, we are going to have the last 5 years for achieving the SDGs. That's right. So it means that many of the global agendas are going to be addressing to reach this particular goal. For instance, in 2023, in 2022 and 2023, different public institutions in the Maldives will need to present the results of the strategic action plan. As you know, the strategic action plan started, if I'm not wrong, in 2019. So for 2023, before elections, and even in 2022, we need to present the result of the SIP. In 2024, we are going to have the national plan event. That's good. Since we are running out of time, even when you implement this activity, you can also take your mobile phones and ask in Google, like, what events are going to happen in 2022, in 2023, global events on 2024. And this information will allow you to populate this kind of canvas. Again, this exercise, it's about gathering information about what events might happen in order to get more, a global vision, and in consequence, try to make our policies, our design of policies more accurate, or understanding at least the impact of these global events. Before moving on, any particular question, any particular question on how to use this tool, or suggestion, or anything else, please go ahead. Feel free to do that. This is time to do that. Open up your mics. Is this useful? Is this tool not useful at all? Okay. Okay. Let's stop here, because unfortunately we are running out of time. And again, this is a familiarization exercise. And now I'm gonna present the next familiarization activity we are gonna have. For this particular activity, I'm afraid we are not gonna have time to cover this activity. However, I'm gonna explain, and we are gonna retake this for the next and final webinar. But this canvas is really useful, and you can use this canvas for your planning exercise, in which you try to identify how these trends are going to impact in your institutions. For this case, we are going to have an exercise thinking on the Civil Service Commission. So we need to identify what does these trends mean for us in terms of the demographic change, how this demographic change is going to impact the country, and in consequence, how this demographic change will impact in local communities, in the public institutions, at different levels, at the social level, educational level, economic level, and so on. What are going to be the impact of the economic and environmental trends in our country? As you are familiar with, obviously, the climate change has a big impact in the Maldives in terms of the sea level, in terms of the tourist offer, in terms of many things, in terms of the economy of the country. So we need this exercise is based on, this exercise is basically focused on identify how these trends, global trends, will impact in our particular companies or institutions. Other in the upcoming years. For instance, also, what's going to be the impact of the technology? What is going to be the impact of the social media in the accessing to the job market in the Maldives? What's going to be the impact of artificial intelligence in the Maldives, in the business institutions in the Maldives? What's going to be the citizens' needs according to these global trends? And obviously, what might be the uncertainties that might happen in the future 5 years or 10 years time. This is the activity that we are gonna start to work on in the next webinar, but this is just for you to keep in mind because unfortunately we are running out of time. So in order to start to wrapping up, I'm going to share with you a further readings or information in case you want to know or explore a little bit more on foresight, on foresight activities. So if you are interested on reading more about this topic, you can explore this website, which is the Institute for the Future, in which you might find different tools, not only for the public sector, but even for the civil society organizations and the private sector in order to think and plan the future. This is one website that you can visit. The other information or tool of, source of information is this report, which is a way forward, but is governing in an age of emergency. This is an UNDP report launched, if I'm not wrong, is 2020, actually, in which it's identified different, not only trends, but also they present different tools for foreseeing activities at different levels at the government level. And finally, you can also, if you want to explore more toolkits and more information, you can browse on this Nesta web page, in which you might find a lot of information on that regard. Again, unfortunately, because this is just a webinar, an introductory exercise, we cannot explore all of them because this is absolutely amazing and interesting. And obviously, I'm just trying to touch upon them in order to get you familiar with this. Okay, what are the next steps? The next steps, we're going to have the second part of this How to Future, in which we are going to explore the previous tool that the previous tool I presented to you, the impact of the trends on the institutions in the next 5 years, and also with another tool that you can use in your activities. So let me stop here because we are running out of time, but I would really like to know in the section of, I would really like to know if you have any question or comment that do you want to share about this information I just shared with all of you. Please feel free to open up your mics and share your ideas. Anyone? Do you? I know we're running out of time, but I really like to listen from you. Do you think this is important? Do you want to explore more on one particular tool? Is this useful or is not useful at all? What do you think regarding your particular needs? Because this is absolutely important for me to know if that makes sense to you, or do you want, or do you prefer to explore more one particular tool? Let me know, please, or any kind of insight or comment.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Mohammad Ali. I'm from Maldives Immigration. So I would like to ask you, sir, what's your plan to about this sessions focusing to us participate for us?
Thank you, Mohammed.
What's the advantage about this session about the participating for us? This is a 1 hour session, no? That's why I would like to ask you, what's your focus into us?
Yeah, so sorry, it's breaking up a little bit, but if I got your point, this webinar is just a familiarization webinar with different concepts and tools that you might apply or might be useful just to think about the future of your activities. Unfortunately, and since we have participants from different institutions and with different backgrounds, I'm not focusing on one particular issue because probably many of you might feel like, okay, but this is not my working area. That's why I'm just trying to keep this approach in a, let's say, in a general manner or in a general way. But I'm not sure if it's exactly the question you are asking to me, Ali.
I mean, what's the advantage of us these sessions about the informations? Because this is 1 hour session, but it's a very big points that you are mentions, like globalizations, with the economics, everything's for the country. That's why.
Sorry, I don't know if it's the connection, but I didn't catch really.
Mohammed Ali, if you could write your question down in the chat box, I think it would be easier for Mr. Fernando to get your question.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Imad, please go ahead. Open up your mic. You are raising your hand. Please open your mic.
Thank you very much. I think the session is very, very useful today, both at the national level as well as for the local government level, because I think foresight is very, very important for a dynamically changing country like the Maldives, where we face disaster risk, where we face climate change risk, where we face economic risk, where we face other types of social risks. So I think we need to be always on the lookout for the signals. We should be always on the lookout for the trends, and then we should be prepared for what is to come into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Imad, for your participation. Yeah, please, if anybody else wants to share your insight, go ahead, an idea. Yeah, I'm really aware of this is a broad topic, and you know, try to summarize this huge and interesting topic in 1 hour is really challenging, even for me specifically when I was just designing all of these activities, because every webinar we have had is just for 1 week, one working week, in which we can, you know, really explore on, you know, on the different tools of foresight or design thinking, having discussion about different tools, how to apply these tools. But that's why we have focused this webinar on get familiar with, let's say get familiar with this kind of tools. However, I would really also like to let you know that we as the Accelerator Lab and also as UNDP have worked on with these particular tools for specific projects. Obviously, we cannot work on this webinar for any specific project because this is, we have, as I mentioned previously, people with different backgrounds and from different institutions. But if you also want to work on this, with these methodologies, with these tools in your institutions, you can count on the UNDP and the Accelerator Lab to support the whole process on that, because we have worked on that at global level with different offices. Yeah, just to like a heads up for all of you. Anybody else who wants to share your ideas, please go ahead. Anybody else? I think yeah, go ahead. If I think Imad, you have raised your hand again, please go ahead.
Thank you again. If no one else has any other feedback, I would like to say that I think what we really need in all our institutions is how to apply this in our working daily environment. So as you mentioned, we are talking about the signals, trends, and all these things. So for example, I think we have to go now a bit more into detail as to how we can apply this. For example, just for an example, a signal like the change in tourism patterns and the types of people and also the markets. These are sort of signals that we see every day. And then how we adapt to those signals and then try to change our product. So I think how do we use this information and then to apply them in our daily or in our planning activities in our organizations? I think that will be a very good thing for probably to take this next as a step forward, is a direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure, noted. I'm gonna try to focus on that, because yeah, it's really challenging to try to compile everything on that, but noted. I'm gonna try for this last session just to work on this particular way, but that's, yeah, on this particular way. Okay, I think shall we stop here and then over to you at the Civil Service Commission. Again, let me thank to all of you for your participation, for your insights on this session. And then let's meet up again on the next 5 and final session on this webinar series. Over to you, colleagues at the Civil Service Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Fernando. Once again, it was a very informative, a very enlightening session, I'm sure, for all our participants. This brings us to the end of our 4th webinar in UNDP Maldives Accelerator Lab's NEXTGEN webinar series for Maldives Civil Service. We still have one more webinar to go before the series is done. So if you would like to participate in the next webinar, you can follow us and stay tuned on our social media platforms. We'll be coming up with the details for the next webinar very soon. But let me take this opportunity to thank our facilitator, Mr. Fernando Galindo, and the executives from UNDP Maldives Accelerator Lab for the collaboration, and I'm sure we're looking forward to more such collaboration in the future. So once again, thank you all for participating. I'll be sharing the evaluation link for today's webinar in the chat box within a few minutes. Hope you all have a good day. Thank you.